haven't met previously, my name is Martha Whiting and I'm the content marketing manager here at Wynter. And I'm really thrilled today to welcome our workshop guest, Udi Ledergor. Udi served as a CMO during Gong's rise to industry dominance, and he helped Gong go from zero to hundreds of millions in revenue while achieving a multi-billion-dollar valuation. Now, since then, Udi has advised startups, served on boards, and mentored hundreds of marketers. And his work reveals how courage and creativity can work together to build iconic brands. Now, we all know that enterprises don't tend to buy from startups or smaller companies. They tend to kind of take that one look at the team, see that customer list, and suddenly it's sort of like a thanks, but no thanks. But the really good news is that Udi is here to reveal the exact tactics that make enterprises forget that you're a startup and see you as too impressive to ignore. Now, I'm going to hand over to Udi, but just a quick housekeeping. We're going to be having our Q&A at the end of the session today. So please keep your questions coming in throughout. I'll be disappearing off your screen, but I'll be joining back on. So you can write those in the Q&A section in the chat box as well. And please feel free to ask absolutely anything. I'm sure Udi is very happy to answer anything at all. So yeah, please keep those questions coming in throughout. Now, please join me in welcoming Udi.
Thank you, Martha, and thank you everyone for showing up this early morning or late night or middle of the day, depending on where you are in the world. And it seems like you're representing a big part of the globe. So I appreciate you coming in. My name is Udi Ledergor. As Martha said, I've been at a company called Gong for the last 9 years. I was marketer number 1 and employee number 13, and I had the great fortune of growing the marketing team to a team of 60 incredible marketers that did some of the most incredible B2B marketing work that the last decade has seen. And in the last couple of years, as I transitioned into my role as chief evangelist, I've had some time to interview my team members and document everything we did, or at least the highlights of it. And I'm really excited to share that with the world. So one way we're going to do that is in today's session. And at the very end, I'll share another way that you can get more resources and more materials if you want to nerd out about all the incredible things that we did throughout my time at Gong, but not only throughout my time, but also from other CMOs and team members that I interviewed. So let's get started. One of the premises of my approach to courageous marketing is that playing it safe is the riskiest strategy. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit before we jump to solutioning, just to make sure we're kind of on the same sheet of music here. So we've all been in that position as we come in as a marketer and we're not sure what kind of risk appetite the CEO or the head of sales or the company culture will tolerate. And we tend to follow what's known as best practices. I'm sure a few of us have done that. I know I have. But here's the problem with best practices. Best practices in reality are boring practices. And the reason is that by the time anything becomes a best practice, it's because pretty much everyone is doing it. If you follow what everyone else is doing, at best, you will get ordinary results. They'll probably be okay, but there will be ordinary results. If you're looking for extraordinary results, you can't be following the best practices because that won't get you there. And I think the reason why a lot of us default to the best practices is because we're afraid of getting fired for doing something different. We all, well, some, I won't say all, but people my age would remember the famous 1980s saying in the IT world, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. Well, we still have that mindset. And for those who don't know the reference, IBM was the leader in mainframes in the day. So if you didn't want to make a risky choice, you just bought IBM, right? And so today, if you do the same Google and LinkedIn paid ads and you write the blog and you tweet a couple of times a day, that's the equivalent, the modern day equivalent of buying an IBM in the 1980s. You won't get fired for it immediately, but you're probably not going to create an exciting marketing strategy that's going to create engagement, raving fans, pipeline, and ultimately sales. And so the first thing we need to do is realize that doing what won't get us fired today might actually get us fired in a couple of quarters when the CEO and the head of sales see that marketing is just not producing the brand awareness or the pipeline that it needs us to create. And so starting that mindset shift and doing things that are risky is going to get you there. And I hope today to inspire you with maybe a dozen or so examples of how to step away from playing it safe and do things that actually get results. And we'll be focusing today mostly on things that make your brand look bigger. As Martha said, many startups start out trying to sell to enterprises, but then they find themselves in a catch-22 because large enterprises, guess what? They don't like buying from startups because they're not sure you're even going to be there next year. They know that your product is probably not ready. You don't have all the references that they're looking for. So why would they buy from you? Guess who they're buying from? IBM. So in his book, Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey Moore argued that one of the ways to bridge the chasm between the early adopters and the early majority is with great marketing. Your product has to be there as well, but that's the topic of a different webinar. Today, we're going to talk about how great marketing can help you bridge that gap between early adopters that are willing to take the risk and use your product to early majority, which is really when a company starts taking off, when the everyday customers start buying, not just the early innovators and adopters that are used to taking risks. So let's jump right in. And I'd like to start with a kind of a funny, somewhat esoteric example. So when we launched our first visual identity at Gong, it was 2018, we knew that we wanted to appeal to tech companies' sales teams. And back then it was fully in-office culture before COVID, if anyone remembers. And we auditioned actors to portray salespeople and sales leaders of different genders and races and ages. And we put them on our website after taking a photo shoot of them, which was lots of fun. And then we realized we needed an office dog because they were actually very common. At Gong's office, we regularly had 3 dogs on any given day roaming the offices. And so we had 6 or 7 dogs audition for the role of our office dog for this made-up sales team that we put on our website. And Bruno, that you see here, is the dog who made it and got the role after auditioning with 6 or 7 other dogs. So once we saw Bruno, we're like, oh, this is our office dog. And Bruno is still with us today. This must be like 7 years later. You can still find him if you go to our website, gong.io. You'll be chatting with Bruno at the bottom right on that chat bot, and you'll still find him on a bunch of our swag and many other items and kind of Easter eggs that we hide around our website and product. But when we launched Bruno, it was not something that many companies did. So we looked at hundreds of B2B websites just to see what kind of environment we're living in, not because we wanted to copy them. We looked at hundreds of B2B websites and we found that most of them was using what one of my team members jokingly called Series A blues, which was all these smoky shades of blues. They pair beautifully with whites and grays. And that's pretty much what every B2B website looked like back in 2018. If you don't believe me, go back to the Wayback Machine and check me out. And so we decided, okay, if everyone's doing these blues, we're not going to compete by finding a better shade of blue. We're going to go in that exact opposite direction. So we chose fuchsia pink and bright purple, and we slapped a drooling bulldog. He's really drooling and smelly in real life. I can attest to this since I've spent quite a few hours with Bruno. And we put him all over our website and our product and everywhere else. And then we launched that. And even internally, some people said, Udi, I don't get it. Are you sure? And I'm like, yes. This is going to make us different. This is going to make us stand out. People will be talking about us. That's what we need at this stage if we want to appear much bigger than we are. And we launched it. And a few days later, my chief product officer, who was monitoring the in-product chat, sent me the message that you see on screen right now from one of our enterprise users. And he asked, why is there effing bulldog on my login screen? He thought this was like a prank or a phishing site or something like that, which of course we laughed out. We laughed at and we explained. But this was the exception. The majority of our audience, of our prospects, and of our customers really, really enjoyed the fresh take that we had on a B2B brand. And that served us really, really well for many years. Even 3 years later, when we did our first major refresh on the brand, we kept the pink, we kept the purple, we even kept the bulldog, but we did a facelift in many areas to move from being kind of the juvenile delinquents that we were in 2018 to slightly more mature teenagers in 2021, because at this point we were serving many larger enterprise customers. But the point here was that not only did this not deter enterprise customers from working with us, it actually helped us stand out in the early days. Okay, here's another really fun example that I like giving. So The most boring email of the year that most of us have to send or receive is usually early in the year. Our lawyers update the privacy policy based on any legal changes of the last year. And we have to notify customers in most countries and states. We have to, by law, notify our customers that we've changed our privacy policy. And if you've ever opened one of those emails, it's like the most boring email of the year. So when my team came to me one year and said, Udi, we need to send out the privacy policy email, like, what do we do with this? I gave them a very simple brief. I said, don't make it boring. And I trusted them to figure out a way of not making it boring. Because in our mind, everything is a marketing opportunity for a moment of delight with our audience. Everything is, whether you're sending out the webinar invite or another event invite or your weekly content email, a product launch update, anything can be a moment of delight that creates more engagement, more loyalty, more fun for your customers and audience. And I thought we could do this with a privacy policy email as well. If you've ever sent out a privacy policy email, I'd love for you to put in the chat, if you remember, even roughly speaking, what was your open rate? Was it 10%, 20%, 80%? What percentage of your audience opens your privacy policy email? And if you don't remember yourself, go ahead and take a guess what a privacy policy email open rate should look like. While you're doing that, I'll wait a moment. I'd love to see a few numbers here in the chat. So if you're brave enough to share either your guess or your actual number, what kind of open rate would you expect from a privacy policy email? 15% from Chris, 6% from Hannah, 0.5% from Kareem, 1%, less than 1%. Yeah, those sound about right for privacy policy email. So we send out an email, and we didn't want to settle for these numbers, which are absolutely like good benchmarks. So our privacy policy email ended up getting a 39.5% open rate. That's 39.5%, just shy of 40%, which even for the most exciting content email would be a really hard number to beat. And the reason we did this, I know it's a little bit hard to read on the screen, so I'll read you the subject line. The subject line reads, "Our lawyers made us send this." Okay. Subject line reads, our lawyers made us do this. So that is the subject line. And we knew what we were doing. We wanted to alarm people to open the email, because who would not open an email with that subject line? So it turns out 39.5% thought it was worth opening. When they opened the email, I'm not going to read you the whole email, you can see bits of it here. We got back to our very lighthearted tone and we said, hey, you must be sick of all these privacy policy emails, but yes, we have to send this out as well. And so we changed them and we let you know, check. And Mrs. Spears here came to the rescue and added a little levity to our email. And if anybody actually wanted to read the privacy policy, we included the mandatory link to that privacy policy. Not only did our customers not ignore this email, as we typically do find people ignore the privacy policy email, they took screenshots and posted it on Twitter, on LinkedIn. A lady wrote an entire blog post about it on Medium, which you can still find. And people were just going nuts about the creativity and moment of fun and levity that we created with what is usually the most boring email of the year. And so the reason I show you this example is, if you're thinking, well, Gong has all these amazing content pieces that they write, I don't have that, I'm in a boring industry, I've got boring content, I've got boring emails. My pushback is that nothing has to be boring. I just showed you how we took the most boring email of the year and made it a fun, delightful moment that 40% of our audience opened and many of them shared further. When was the last time anyone shared any pieces of your content, let alone your privacy policy email? It can be done, folks. There are no boring industries. There are no boring companies. There's only lazy marketing. And so I hope you remember this example as an inspiration of taking the absolute most mundane thing and turning it into a moment of delight. Okay, moving on. I want to talk about the meat and potatoes of this session, which is going to be punching above your weight. And this goes back to the premise of, why would large enterprises buy from a small startup like me? Well, our product team is trying to make our product as enterprise ready as they can, but I in marketing need to make sure that the relevant audience hears about us and trusts us enough to give us a try. And so to do that, we need to look much bigger than we are for them to even give us the time of day. So how do we do that? Not only figure out creatively how do we look bigger than we are, but how do I budget for this? I can't compete with the giant players' budgets. If you're playing in a field where there's a large incumbent, it could be a CRM or an ERP or some other big provider, how are you going to out budget them? Well, you're not, right? Spoiler, you're not. And so how do we still do this on a budget and look much bigger than we are? Well, I want to show you a few inspirations. And at the end of the section, I will summarize the formula for you so that you can take both the inspiration and the formula and go create your own punch above your weight moment. Okay. So I've already said this in several ways, but here's one way that's memorable. Great marketing makes your company appear to be 2 years ahead of where it really is. And that is absolutely true. And there's several ways you can do this. I remember in 2019, when we did our first customer event, Celebrate, we had about 500 people show up to that. And one of the executives in the audience caught me in a break and asked me, hey, Udi, how many people are you guys at Gong? Do you have like 1,000 people? And I said, yeah, something like that. At the time, we had less than 200 employees at Gong, but we created an event experience, and the campaigns that led up to it made this person feel like we were 5 times bigger than we were. They thought we were 1,000 people, and he was not the only one who felt that we were so much bigger. So that is the type of impact that you can create with the right type of marketing. Okay, here's one first example. So when you're trying to look much bigger than you are, it's not always just to bring in customers. Sometimes it's even to hire great people. And when you're a tiny startup, and back in 2018, when I put this billboard up, we were a very tiny startup. We needed to hire a lot of great people. Not many people had heard about us. And so I decided, okay, what can I do that would make us look much bigger and make people curious about working for us? So this specific billboard is in a location in Israel, in Herzliya. There's a big industrial center where literally hundreds of startups and larger companies have their offices now. And we had our tiny little office in a WeWork in Herzliya. Nothing special about it. But I wanted employees who could commute into that area every day, or were already commuting into that area every day, pay attention and check out our careers website, because we were hiring for dozens of roles. And so I worked with a creative agency, and we came up with this idea of buying a single billboard. I saw in the chat that a few of you are in Israel, so you might recognize this. This is what's called the bridge or Gesher Asira. This is the bridge in Herzliya. So it's a pedestrian bridge that also has a very large billboard on it. You can see the cars underneath to give you an idea of how big this is. And it is double-sided. And so on the side that employees saw as they were driving into Herzliya for the, I think, 2 weeks or 4 weeks that I had this on, they saw a sign that said, Gong employees, have a great day. And on the other side of the bridge, which you're looking at here, it just said, Gong employees, thanks and see you tomorrow, which is what the drivers saw on their commute out of work in the evening. And we thought that it would be a really funny, cool, creative idea if we use this almost like a post-it note or an email to employees, which is a somewhat unusual use for a billboard, because most people imagine like these things cost a fortune. Like, why wouldn't you use this for some big bombastic marketing slogan or whatever? And we're like, no, we're just going to make use of this in the most mundane, almost boring way of wishing our employees a great day and then thanking them for their great work and see you tomorrow. And that's all we did. Well, that's all we did. You by now you would recognize Bruno the bulldog there. And if you look at the far left and right of the billboard, you see we also added in very small print our careers website. So people could go in and check us out if they wanted to learn more about us, because Gong was not a very well-known brand name back then. So nobody really knew what Gong was. But if they followed up and went to gong.io/careers, they would see and learn about our open roles. And guess what? Not only did we see a huge uptick in job applications and in website traffic, which we monitored, but we also got press coverage because of the unique use of this billboard, which was something that Israel had not really seen before. It got press coverage in one of Israel's top daily newspapers, which created even more traffic to our website, where people were like, okay, I need to learn about this company. Who are these people doing all these crazy things? So this was a really, really fun moment. And it was a good lesson for what was to come, which is, yeah, we can ignore what most companies are doing. I can't buy 100 billboards. I could buy one. It was not expensive. I could afford one, literally. But if you only have one, then you've got to get really, really creative, because, and this is a good lesson to remember as you grow your team, a big budget can make you lazy. A big budget can make you revert to best practices and just do what everyone is doing. A common form of this is just outsourcing a bunch of things to agencies. Agencies are not going to crack something creative and new for you. They're going to follow the same recipe book that they've used on 20 clients before you. So that's all you're going to get. It's going to be okay, but you're not going to get this type of creative freedom and novelty that you could come up with if money was a problem and you only had one billboard to optimize. So that's really one fun example. Here's another example of using the billboard idea. This one, I'm sure you recognize the iconic location, is in Times Square. Now, Times Square for many, many years is associated with some of the world's biggest advertisers, the world's biggest companies, right? You regularly see their billboards for new Netflix shows, Broadway plays, the largest tech companies. I mean, when Apple comes out with a new iPhone, they're going to take a Times Square billboard because that's what you do. And what you're seeing here is one of several Gong billboards in Times Square. And you might be thinking, wow, I can't afford that. That's a crazy budget. I mean, Gong is this big company now. They've got lots of money. They can afford this. Well, I actually did this before I had a big budget. And you don't need a big budget to do this. I can let you in on a secret if you promise not to tell anyone. You can get a Times Square billboard for as little as like $500. I didn't forget any zeros. $500. What? How do you do that? Okay. If you actually want to do that after this presentation, go to a website like blimpbillboards.com. That's one of the companies that sell on-demand, self-serve digital media up in Times Square and many other locations where they have a media network. Now, here's the trick. For $500, it might be $1,000 today or a different price tomorrow. Don't take my word for the exact number, but for a very, very affordable amount, you can get a billboard that will run in rotation with maybe 6 or 7 other ads on that billboard. And you might be able to buy it for just an hour or one day. Okay, you might be wondering, well, what's the point of getting a billboard for 1 hour? There's random people on their way to see Lion King. They're not going to buy anything because they saw a billboard in Times Square. Why would I waste my money on that? And I'll tell you why. It's not a waste of money, because the trick here is I use the iconic location. I bought a billboard maybe for an hour or a day. I made sure that I had a photographer and a videographer waiting there, checking the best angles, the best lighting. And as soon as the billboards came up, they took a bunch of photos that we could then use. And then we amplified this campaign on our social media channels. In this case, we used the billboards for an outstanding Gongster campaign, which is our version of Employee of the Year. And so all the dozen or so employees of the year, they were very, very excited to see their faces light up on Times Square. We also did this in Piccadilly Circus in London and other locations in Dublin and in Azrieli in Israel. So we took all these iconic locations, and for very cheaply, we bought these billboards. And then we had the employees come there, take a selfie, send it to mom, send it to the family WhatsApp group, and then post it on LinkedIn. And then everyone else in the company also amplified this because they were so proud of their teammates and they were so proud of the type of recognition that they were getting. And employees started approaching me like, how do I get on a billboard next year? What do I have to do to be up there? And as you can imagine, this also brought in a ton of candidates wanting to work for a company like Gong and companies wanting to do business with a company like Gong. And so the trick here was to buy a very affordable version of this medium, which is usually associated with large advertisers, and then amplifying it both with our own social channels and by using employee activation. So this is another way of looking much, much bigger than we really are. Here's one more version of this, a little bit bigger. We're getting bigger here. This is in Montgomery Station in San Francisco, which is one station away from where Dreamforce is usually held at the Moscone Center. So one year during Dreamforce, when we launched our revenue intelligence category, we wanted the world to know about it. But when I looked at options for sponsoring Dreamforce, it was a 6-figure amount to get a little booth by the bathroom. And if I wanted to compete with the big company booth, that was a 7-figure amount I could never afford. And honestly, I just didn't think it was the right thing to do. So for a fraction of that cost, I took out this full takeover of Montgomery Station for a few weeks. I covered the floors and the walls and the columns, and I took static signs and I took digital signs. And again, for a fraction of what it would cost me to take the smallest booth I could afford at Dreamforce, I covered the whole station. Thousands of people saw this while they were walking there on their way to Dreamforce, and many more thousands saw this as we amplified it on our social media channels. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so you've got the billboard trick. What else have you got for me? Well, the same idea can be applied to a bunch of other mediums that are usually associated with large advertisers. Let me show you 3 or 4 of those. So here's one for you. Print is not entirely dead yet. And many people are still impressed when they see a company take out a full page ad in a publication like the Wall Street Journal, right? You might be imagining, well, this is a 6 or 7-figure amount to take out a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal. And you would be right if this were the national edition of the Wall Street Journal. Now, turns out you can buy a much cheaper regional edition of the Wall Street Journal. In this case, I took the West Coast edition because that's where most of my customers are. So this cost a fraction of what the national edition costs. I think this cost maybe $24,000. So it's money. It's real money. If you just raised your seed round, this is probably too soon for you to do. But once you've raised an A or a B, you can afford $24,000 on a meaningful campaign. So what we did is we took a full page ad, and you can see that when you open the paper, this is what you see in the corner. It says the Wall Street Journal. It doesn't say this advertiser cheaped out and got the West Coast edition. It just says the Wall Street Journal. So what did we do? Not only did we put this ad in the Wall Street Journal for the actual subscribers who go over their paper in the morning to read, but we took a few good photos of it, with the coffee mug on it. You've seen those before. And we amplified it on social media so that our real captive audience, the ones who follow us on LinkedIn and other channels, they would see this and they're like, ooh, Gong just took a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal. They must be in serious good business. So that's another way of taking a medium that makes you look much bigger. Here's one more example. You might recognize the building in the back. That is Moscone Center during Dreamforce 2019, the last one before COVID. Once again, the official sponsorship options were terribly expensive to get a booth at the show. So instead, I decided to hijack some of the traffic coming to the show by wrapping 20 rideshare cars. These are Uber and Lyft cars that I specifically paid to swarm around Moscone Center, dropping off attendees at the show, picking up attendees at the end of the day. So a ton of people saw these cars. Some of them actually knew me. They texted me a photo and said, did I just get into a Gong cab? Like, what is this campaign? And of course, we posted videos and images like this on social media. So people thought we literally took over the show and we were like the official transportation partner or something like that. This entire campaign cost $40,000. Again, real money, but a fraction of what it would cost me to take a good sized booth and do anything meaningful inside the show. And just by being different, because nobody else did this that year, I was able to get a lot of attention from this campaign. Okay, let's go over 2 more pretty exciting examples in sports. So again, you might not be thinking about sports sponsorships because those things tend to be very, very expensive. But I'm here to show you a couple of hacks where I actually made it work in a really meaningful way with a relatively small budget. So over the years, I'd build relationship with directly. I never used a media agency. People always ask me, Udi, do you have a really great media guy or person? Or I'm not, no, I know people at NBC. I know people at CBS. I know people at all the out-of-home advertising companies like Outfront and Clear Channel and Intersection, because I've created relationships, and when they have some new inventory or some new medium that's interesting, they know they can come to me because I'm open to hearing about it, and I will occasionally do experiments with them. And so one day, Jesse from NBC called me and said, Udi, we're trying this new thing. It's a digital overlay where you can put your logo on the Warriors court in the Chase Center in San Francisco. It's an 18,000 seat home of the Golden State Warriors, one of the most beloved basketball teams in the state. And we're charging by the quarter of the game. So every quarter of the game, we're selling it to a different company to put their logo on it. And the thing about this is, you see the Gong logo in the upper left part of the court. It's not a real decal. It's just a digital overlay, but it looks very, very real for viewers on television. And so the Bay Area's viewers of NBC are going to see your logo on the court if you do this. And he said, since we're just getting started with this, I can sell you 3 quarters, like at 3 different games for $5,000. What do you say? I'm like, yeah, let's try that. That seems like a lot of fun. I know a lot of our audience and our employees are big Warriors fans, and that would make an excellent conversation starter for our salespeople if they could talk about last night's game and someone saying, oh, I saw your logo on the court. That was amazing. So Jesse said, you know what? I'll give you a 4th freebie if you do that. I said, you've got it. So I bought this campaign for three games, and I got the 4th for free. As soon as the first one aired, we already started hearing about it in sales calls, which I could track using Gong. So all I had to do is set up a tracker or search for Warriors, and immediately I found those calls where people were saying, oh, I saw you on the Warriors court last night. How do you manage that? That's pretty impressive. So this was a very cheap campaign that brought in the first 3 games, a lot of great publicity. But then in the 4th game, Steph Curry, the star player of the Warriors, breaks the record for most career 3-pointers, which I had to ask Russell on my team what the heck that means. But if you know, you know. It's kind of a big deal for basketball fans. And he did that while hovering over the Gong logo. And so this is the actual tweet that Warriors on NBC shared with the world. And you can imagine a few millions of people probably saw this. It went wild. And this is the type of opportunity that you can find if you're not afraid to get out there and run experiments and try things that are different and do things that are sometimes difficult to measure. But nobody asked me for the ROI on this. When this blew up, like, everybody was talking about it. So this is a really fun example. I want to show you one last one, also in sports. This is in basketball, but now we're moving into football. So this was with NBC, but I also had a contact at CBS. And so Monica from CBS emailed me one year saying, this was in 2019. She said, Udi, I just read about your recent fundraising. I think you'd make a great advertiser on the Super Bowl, no less. And I replied to Monica. I said, Monica, thanks for reaching out. I hope one day to be able to advertise on the Super Bowl, but this is nowhere near the budgets that I have right now. If you've ever raised money, you know this. You get emails the next day from people trying to sell you yachts and private jets. And this was just one of those emails after our fundraising. She had an alert set up, and she thought I could advertise in the Super Bowl. I said, sorry, but this would be a waste of your time. So she responded very politely but firmly saying, I think you'd be surprised with the affordable options I can offer you. Is it worth a 15-minute chat? I said, yes, Monica, you've piqued my curiosity. I want to learn more about this. Even if not for this year, for 3 years later, I want to learn about this. So I met with Monica. And what Monica taught me is that, like many of the other examples I showed you here today, people know that Super Bowl is very, very expensive. And that is true for the national spot. To buy a national spot in this year's Super Bowl and 30-second spot within the game is about $6.5 to $8 million. Okay, so it's about $7 million just for the media for those 30 seconds. And that's before you start creating an ad, which most people spend millions of dollars as well, getting a celebrity and creating a big ad out of it. So it can be a $10 to $20 million spend easily. But what Monica told me is, look, you don't have to buy the national spot. If you're selling to only a specific audience, where's your audience? I said, well, a lot of them at the time were in Silicon Valley, which is where a lot of startups and other tech companies are, and also some in New York and a couple of other cities. She said, well, you could buy just those regional spots. And when people are at home watching the game, they're being fed commercials. They're being served commercials both from the national inventory and from the regional inventory, it's the same experience. They have no idea whether that Coca-Cola or Farmers Insurance ad is coming from the national inventory or from the regional inventory. So you could slide into that. You could buy one spot in one region and you could get away pretty cheaply with doing that. I said, okay, what do you mean by pretty cheaply? And she said, well, San Francisco is your area of interest because a lot of tech companies are there. But guess what? It's a very small city among the bigger cities. There's only 800,000 residents in San Francisco. So the networks don't charge a lot for broadcasting in that region because it's based on the civilian population, not the number of companies in that area. And so I think I paid about $150,000, which is a lot of money. I will acknowledge that. It was a lot of money, but within a budget of, by then, several millions, it was something I could consider. $150,000 to run your ad during the Super Bowl in the Bay Area. And then I started looking at other regions, and I saw that New York was also affordable. And then at the very last minute, an CBS contact from Seattle reached out and said he just had another advertiser bail out on him, and he had this inventory for in-game spot for $75,000. Do I want it? I said, yes, I want it. So I ended up buying San Francisco, New York, and Seattle that year for a total of less than $300,000, which again, for a young startup is a lot of money. I'm not recommending you use your first paycheck to do this, but once you're a little more established and you have a few millions in your budget, it is something you can consider. We ran with the ad. And before I show you the ad, I want to share one creative challenge. And after I show you the ad, we'll talk about the results. So a creative challenge I had is, most of the Super Bowl commercials are for beers and insurance and consumer products. And so a lot of people who don't care about them much, they go to the bathroom, they fill their Doritos bowl during the commercial break. And I wanted to make sure that all the VPs of sales in the audience are glued to their seats and they don't get up while my ad is playing. How would they know that this ad is for them and they should not go to the bathroom or fill their Doritos bowl while the Gong ad is playing? And so I had this idea. I said, well, how would I solve that if I were sending out an email? I would put in the subject line, VPs of sales make these 3 mistakes, right? How would I do that on social media? I would put something about VP of sales in the title so that the VPs of sales recognize their title, they stop scrolling. We all do this. We know it works. It increases win rate, open rates. It increases click rates. Well, I thought if that works on email and social media, why wouldn't this work on the Super Bowl? And so that was the brief I gave my creative agency, which I ended up spending a very small amount of money with. I made this a commercial you're about to see for less than $100,000, which is unheard of when for Super Bowl ads. When I reached out to another CMO who'd done prior Super Bowl commercials and I told him my budget and I asked if he could recommend a creative agency, he laughed me off. He said, I don't know anyone who would work with that budget. You're on your own, buddy. So I went to a video agency that I did much smaller projects with. They'd never done a Super Bowl commercial before. And I gave them my brief and I said, do you think you can make me a Super Bowl commercial? And they said, yeah, we'd love this opportunity to make a Super Bowl commercial. And so of the 30 seconds that we got on screen, I used the first 4 to make sure that the VP of sales know that this commercial is for them. Ready to watch it? Here we go.
Funny thing happened this year. My sales team went remote, leaving everyone feeling a little. But my sales team got through it with Gong. Thanks to Gong, I know when a deal's going south. Gong even shows us what our top reps are doing. So now the whole team's doing it. That means more coffee for more closers. Grow your revenue with Gong.
So that is our 2021 Super Bowl commercial. And I want to tell you what the results that we saw were. So like any good marketer, while everyone was watching the game, I couldn't even tell you who was playing. I was refreshing my Google Analytics dashboard like any good marketer would be doing. And indeed, I saw a huge peak of traffic the moment this aired. I knew what second of the game is going to air in Seattle and New York and San Francisco. And we saw those very, very clear peaks in traffic. There was no other explanation for it. On a Sunday afternoon, getting that sort of traffic on a B2B software website was very unusual. But not only did we get that traffic during that day, throughout the entire week, we saw an significantly elevated traffic volume. And it actually created a new baseline of our weekly traffic from then on. It never went back down to what it was before the Super Bowl. The second thing I did is I set up a tracker in Gong to hear customers talking about our Super Bowl commercial. And I found hundreds of conversations that week between our salespeople and prospects. Some of them said something like this: hey, I was kind of on the fence about Gong, but then I saw you on the big game yesterday and I decided, okay, it's time to come in and check you out because you're a big deal now. And so I found hundreds of customer conversations talking about our Super Bowl commercial. Our CRO at the time, Ryan, walked into a company, a management meeting on Monday or Tuesday that week. And he said, Udi, I just came off customer calls. We're at a totally new level now after that Super Bowl commercial. People are just so excited and they think we're this huge company. And then at the end of the week, on Friday, my CFO, my very skeptical CFO, Tim, I should say, came to me and said, Udi, do you know that we just broke our all-time record for most pipeline created in a single week? We've never created this much pipeline in a single week since the company was founded. Mike, this has been a good week. So those were the results of my first Super Bowl commercial. And with that, I want to leave you with the formula that hopefully I've shown you so many diverse examples of that you can find your own inspiration out. So number one is to pick an offline medium, and I will add, that's associated with large advertisers. Remember iconic locations like Times Square, Super Bowl, Warriors, Wall Street Journal, Moscone Center. All these things are iconic and known for big advertisers. Two, go buy the smallest version that you can get of it that's affordable. Number three, get creative with the medium. So I'm just going back number two for a second. Remember the regional edition of the Wall Street Journal, 1 minute billboard in Times Square, a regional Super Bowl commercial. Make it small so you can afford it. Number three, get creative with the medium. Remember, I didn't just put my logo on it and that was it. I got very creative, both with the Super Bowl commercial and with the first billboard of wishing employees a good day and the cars around Moscone Center. Like, don't follow the best practices. Do something creative there. Then make sure that you photograph and videograph your campaign from every possible angle so you have something to choose from. And then number five, this is where the magic really happens. You share it on your company's social media to your captive audience. Of course, this works best if you already have a meaningful following. If you have 10 followers, this is not going to create an impact. But if you have many thousands of followers by this point, you will create an impact. And how to create those followers is the topic of another discussion, right? You need to provide actual valuable content so people want to follow you. And then six, the final step is to activate your employees and customers and partners and investors for extended reach. So when we do the Outstanding Gongsters campaign, of course, all the employees want to share that. When we do a campaign that highlights our customers, of course, the customers want to share that. When it's anything meaningful like a fundraise, our investors are going to want to share that. So create a reason and mobilize all these people to share your great achievements. So this, folks, is the punch above your weight formula for how to make your company look much bigger than it really is. Now, one question I'm going to answer preemptively, which I always get is, but how do you get buy-in and budget for these things? Like, nobody would ever let me run this. So here's my answer. Like with medicine, any doctor will tell you the best type of medicine is preventive medicine. Like, eat healthy and work out before you get diabetes, right? Not after. And so here's the marketing version of this. From very early on, I had a budget line item that in the internal marketing team version of it was simply titled Udi's Crazy Ideas. This is true. And I made sure to budget between 5 and 10% of my program's budget for these marketing ideas, these crazy ideas. When it was time for my team to send the budget to the CFO for review and approval, one of my team members made the very wise recommendation: let's change that budget line item from Udi's Crazy Ideas to marketing experiments. It'll look a little bit more professional. So that's what they did, and that was really good advice. And when discussions came about the budget, I used 2 justifications for why we need those marketing experiments. Number one, I explained, all the demand gen channels that we're using right now to create pipeline, they are going to tap out at some point. I don't know if that's going to be next week or next year or in 5 years, but nothing is going to last forever. And so for us to discover the next demand gen channel and meet our pipeline targets, we need to be experimenting with new channels all the time. If LinkedIn is working great now, they might change something in the algorithm tomorrow, it stops working. Everyone's going crazy now because all their Google SEO efforts are dying on the vine now because generative search is on the rise. We have to be experimenting with these next channels. So that's a really, really strong argument for reserving part of your budget for that. And then the second explanation that I give is, look, there's going to be marketing opportunities next year that we will want to take advantage of, but we don't know about them right now during budgeting season. A classic example is next October, there might be an event that marketing will want to sponsor or participate in, but they're only going to announce it in April of next year. So I don't know about that now. And if I don't budget for it and I hear about it in April, I'm going to be really upset that I don't have the budget for it, or we're going to have a harsh discussion about why I need more money and I didn't plan for this in advance. So I know, because I've been doing this for a while, that every year there are new marketing opportunities that pop up. And if I have a budget set aside for these ad hoc opportunities, I'm going to be able to get some really good deals. All the examples I showed you, like the Warriors game thing for $5,000, that came from my marketing experiments budget. If I had to go through a 3-week budget approval cycle to say yes to Jesse, he would have moved on and called the next CMO who could say yes on the spot. So those are the type of opportunities that you get if you plan ahead and you have a marketing experiments budget. And with those two explanations of we need to experiment new demand gen channels before the old ones tap out, and I need some reserve for marketing opportunities I don't know about yet, but I know are going to present themselves, those two tend to work on pretty much every CFO and every CEO. So if you're not using them already, please consider. Okay. To wrap up what we talked about today, we talked about playing it safe being the riskiest strategy of all. We talked about ignoring best practices, not ignoring them and going to do the opposite for the sake of ignoring them, because sometimes best practices are the right thing to do, right? You need to buckle your seatbelt when you get in the car. That's a really good best practice. You should follow that. But when you're looking at these best practices, think about the type of results they would achieve and what are you trying to achieve. And for some things, if ordinary is enough, then best practices are going to get you there. But when they're not enough, you'll want to move past the best practices into courageous marketing. And today we covered just one aspect of that, which is punching above your weight. I hope that was inspirational, and we have a good 10 minutes now to answer your questions on that. While Martha is joining us and taking your questions, I will point you to this resource if you want to learn more about punching above your weight, but also a dozen other topics about courageous marketing, how to build a courageous team that come up with these ideas and do their best work, how to align with sales in a way that produces the best results, how to build your own career, how to do event marketing, how to create a product category, then I invite you to either download your digital copy of Courageous Marketing, get the paperback or hardcover if you, like me, like holding a sturdy book in your hand, or even listening to me talk and read it to you in the audiobook for 4 hours and 42 minutes. My husband says now everyone gets to feel what he feels of me talking nonstop for 4 hours and 42 minutes. Those are your options. Thank you for your attention so far. And Martha, I think we're ready for some questions.
Perfect. Yes, thank you ever so much, Udi. Now, I know we don't have too much time for questions, but it's been such an incredible session. And I'm very sure that everyone who's tuning in right now is going to walk away from the session absolutely not wanting to play it safe. So thank you so much for sharing all of your examples. And I love the aspect as well of giving the team permission to be creative as well. I think that's one of the key things that is often a barrier. I'm sure many people listening right now are experiencing that. So Victoria's got a really good question here in terms of balancing. So how do you balance being interesting and fun with buyer expectations across wide audiences? She's used the example here of the younger generation for cybersecurity love fun and funny content, but high levels, the ones who are signing those deals, equate fun with unprofessional. So how have you got that balance, and have you had experience with that?
We have had experience with that because we're in a pretty similar situation. So the vast majority of Gong users are young Gen Z salespeople. As frightening as it is, it'll soon be Gen Alpha. My kids are Gen Alpha, and they're in a few years going to be in the workforce. These are young people. They get their content on TikTok and Instagram and wherever the young kids go. But the decision makers, the sales leaders, they're either in their late 30s or 40s or 50s. And so we have a marketing program for both. It's kind of a two-pronged approach where we approach the leaders on their channels, which is the conferences, LinkedIn, Twitter, with content relevant to them. And then we create other lighter hearted content, which does go on TikTok and Instagram, but we also mix it in on LinkedIn because that's one place where they do all meet. So you can absolutely do this and it can make sense. But I will also add that I get that pushback a lot from people say, oh, I couldn't do any of this because we're selling to IT people or finance people or bankers, and they're all deadly serious, very, very serious all day long. And I say that I'm calling bullshit. That's not true. Those serious bankers and financiers, they also go on their Instagram or TikTok, depending on their age, and they want to be educated, they want to be entertained. And so if you create a good balance that works for your brand, you don't have to use Gong's tone of voice if that doesn't work for you. But if you create a good balance that speaks to people where they are and is not deadly serious all the time, it's more approachable, it's friendly, that's why they're going to engage with you. And we did this for very serious sales leaders. I've done this in the past for IT leaders. I've seen companies do this for a host of professions, including the most serious ones. This works if you just speak to them like human beings.
Okay, wonderful. That's great advice. And Irina here is asking, for companies without big logos or case studies yet, how do you fake social proof effectively without faking it?
So I think it's actually very easy to get social proof as long as you have a tiny handful of customers that are enjoying using your product. I'll tell you how I did this at Gong. When I joined Gong, we had 11 customers. That was the number. And Amit Bendov, our founder and CEO, called me to start doing marketing. And on my first month, he went to travel to a conference. We didn't even have a budget for me to join, so he went alone. And he said, I think I'm going to meet a few of our customers there. I said, Amit, tell me which hotel you're staying at. Which phone do you have? He had an iPhone. I ordered it on Amazon. I sent to his hotel a neck mic, a tripod, and a light. And I drew Amit a diagram in PowerPoint showing him how to connect what to where so he could use his phone to film him. I said, look, Amit, you're going to grab every one of our 11 customers that you see. Even if you see 3 people from the same customer, get each of them separately, sit them down with our booth's backdrop behind you. You put your iPhone on this tripod to steady it. You put their neck mic here. You put the light here. And here are like 5 questions you can ask them. Film all that on your phone, upload that to Drive, send it to me. I will take care of the rest. Amit was very disciplined back then. He did exactly as I told him. He ended up sending me like 12 videos because he met 4 of our customers, I think, and some of them had multiple people, like a sales leader and an enablement manager and an AE. So he interviewed all of them for like 2 minutes, sent me those videos. I sent it to an editor because I'm a terrible video editor. I sent them to an editor. In a week, I had 12 customer videos, testimonials on my website. This is for a company with 11 customers. I had 12 customer testimonials on the website. They only came from like 4 different companies, but they were different personas, so they told really different stories. So I won't accept excuses. If you have 5 happy customers, go get their testimonials, put them on the website. It's that easy. You don't need fancy technologies. You don't need production companies. Get them on an iPhone, clean it up, and put it on your website.
Okay, incredible. Love that advice. Thank you so much, Udi. We've got a question here. We had one from Russ earlier talking about how the campaigns you spoke about were super successful. And Madeline here is also really interested to know, do you have a campaign example that didn't work so well? Anything that didn't perform as well as you expected? And what did you learn from those moments as well?
Well, most of my campaigns did not perform as well as expected. I could fill a much longer book with failures. And in fact, I did take a good handful of them and put them in the book. So if you're curious, there's more of these in the book because I think there's something to learn from, not from every failure, because there's probably there are infinite ways to fail, but from the attitude of how we treat failures as learnings. So a campaign either succeeds or we learn something from it. That is the attitude that I created on the team, and that creates psychological safety for team members to experiment and take risks and be edgy and do things. Because if you're creating a culture of fear where everything is expected to succeed on the first try, guess what? People are going to do only what's safe. They're going to buy the IBM. They're going to follow the best practices, which, as we know now, are boring practices. They're not going to do anything exciting or risky or edgy. So it's really, really important how you set that attitude on the team. I can give you a couple of quick examples. So I shared the very successful Super Bowl commercial that we did in 2021. On the heels of that success, I was able to secure a budget 3 times bigger for 2022. It was a complete flop and mostly a waste of money. And I do a longer breakdown of this in the book, but a lot of the lessons that I should have learned from 2021, like using the element of surprise and really appealing to the specific buyer persona, like I showed you with that nameplate, and actually showing the product for a few seconds. I ignored all of that good advice in the 2022 commercial when I upgraded to a big agency that had a much bigger budget. And you can find both commercials on YouTube, and there's QR codes for them in the book as well. So you can compare them. The 2022 commercial is much flashier, dozens of extras, acrobats doing backflips. Like really, it's wild. And it did very little for the business because it just kind of blended in with all the big slapstick commercials that you expect to see from beer companies and others. And it didn't explain anything about the product. And unlike Budweiser, they can bring talking frogs to a commercial because you know what their product is and how to consume it. But not enough people knew what Gong was and how to consume it. And so when we did this big slapstick commercial, people just didn't get what the commercial was about. They didn't get who it was for, and they moved on. So that was one pretty expensive failure. Another quick one, again, experiments. So the same company that I used to wrap the cars that I showed you around Moscone Center, at one point they were experimenting with wrapping food delivery robots. And they said, Udi, do you want to try this? I'm like, of course I want to try this. So we have food delivery robots branded as Gong delivering pizzas to our prospects in San Jose, California. It was a flop, but not because the technology didn't work. It was because the targeting capabilities were not precise enough, and delivering pizzas to random people who order pizzas like on Grubhub or Uber Eats in San Jose did not do much for my business. And there was very little matching that we were able to do between our actual prospect list and the people who randomly ordered pizzas in San Jose. So we have some really fun photos and footage of really creepy robots delivering pizzas dressed up in Gong, but it did very little for the business. Those are just 2 of dozens of bad examples.
Okay, amazing. And I think we're literally just about to run out of time. I probably have time for one more question. Do you have time, Udi? Is that okay?
I do.
Okay, perfect. So we've got one from Chloe here, which is quite interesting. It's in terms of the trust gap, okay? So she's asking, when starting out, how did you bridge the trust gap with larger brands when the early traction is strong, but the offering seems too good to be true? What advice do you have to convince bigger brands to try out the product when you already have good social proof and you've got those results ready?
So there, it's really a orchestrated effort between marketing and product. So product need to do a lot of quote unquote boring stuff, like put all the compliance materials through you on the website. Make sure you've got all the security and privacy compliance requirements done. Make them easy to find on the website, in the product. I remember when we did our 2021 website upgrade for the enterprise, we had one of the world's largest companies reach out, and they actually sent a compliment to marketing saying, I found questions to all my security questions on your website. Great job. This is very rare to find. I'm like, yes, we nailed this. So those are like really boring pages that have to be on the website. But if you look at any company who's selling to the enterprise, you'll find them there. So that is absolutely part of what you need to do in partnership with the product team, of course, to make sure that there's just some absolutely minimum viable things you need to do that without them, enterprises will never dare buy from you. So you have to work with them to create those and externalize them on the website, within the product, in your marketing materials, etc. And from there, of course, just use your first and one large enterprise reference, give them whatever discount it requires so that they can speak highly of you and make it happen. The first one is the hardest. After 10, it becomes much easier. After 100, it's just run-of-the-mill business. So best of luck to all of you, and good luck punching above your weight.